Hello and namaste, everyone. Welcome to another Student Influencers podcast with me, Upashna. Today we have with us Anushka Shrestha. Thank you for joining us, Anushka Di.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we normally start our podcast with get to know questions. So, can you tell us a little about yourself and what you're doing right now?
I am Anushka Shrestha. Maybe you would know me as Miss Nepal World 2019. Currently, I do have a full-time job. I work as the regional manager for an Australian public university, ACU, and I also have a startup. And so we recently, but now it's been a year that we started Makuse, a luxury, authentic Nepali desserts brand. So I manage that as well. And we also run the community empowerment project that we started 2 years ago in Sindhupalchok, a pilot community upliftment project. So those are the main things that keep me busy. But besides that, things like these, activities like these, engaging with young Nepali minds is something that I love doing.
Wow, you're doing a lot of things, right? Okay, so since this is an educational podcast, I would like to start from your school. So can you tell us where you completed your schooling from?
I did my schooling from Triyog High School. Well, in fact, I went to preparatory school at Mary Poppins, which is near Prostitugria, and I think it's still there. So, but year 1 to year 10, class 1, they can 10, someone say it was at Triyog High School, which was initially in Bokiskutali when I started, and then it's in Tapasi. After that, I did my high school at Ace Higher Secondary, management, and after that, I did my bachelor's at ACU in Australia, Sydney campus, North Sydney campus, but I did my bachelor's of commerce with an accounting major, and that's it. I haven't done my master's yet, so that's that.
Okay. So are you working as a regional manager for the same university you studied in?
I am, yes. So it's sort of run a full circle, having gone there as a student to now managing the Nepal operations for the same university. It feels like quite a full circle.
Yeah. So how does it feel like working? What do you exactly do? Does it involve like students who want to go to ACU and all of that?
Time, I feel that students and young people wanting to get a global education is so rampant, right? And seeing how strong the diaspora is, Nepali diaspora is, and the world, whether we like it or not, is turning into a white globe. So Bahira Goira, to get a broad education is a choice that many students will make. And I also believe that you can be an Asal Nepali Nagarik, good Nepali citizen, not just by physically sitting in Nepal, but you can do that by becoming a global citizen who is very much committed to their country. So the reason why I joined this role as well is that for the many people going there, if I can be a small part in their journey, which will enable them to, have a better perspective of going abroad. We usually have a very drastic perspective of going abroad. It's either good or bad. You either go for good or you don't. So I personally had a great experience with good guidance. When there was good guidance, I was able to sort of have a good perspective of what abroad education means to me and how can I still be a contributing young Nepali Bhanera. So that is why I took this role. In my current role, we have agents that recruit for us. So I maintain my relations with our recruitment agents. I also speak with many students. I engage with current students, continuing students, alumni as well, but mostly about how the university is strategically placed in Nepal, which is the largest international student market for the university, actually. So in the past pandemic year, we did things such as we collaborated for having PPE sets made from the university for our frontliners. We did online teachers training because, suddenly everyone had to go online and teachers were not really equipped and supported to do that. So our education faculty, about to say, we ran online teachers training. Similarly, right now, we're doing a virtual book club wherein, we develop critical thinking skills. We're usually used to answering things such as when reading books, so what is the author trying to say? Whereas through this book club, we're trying to cultivate the thought of how do I feel about what the author is saying? What do I think about what the author is saying? But is there activities that I do in my role as regional manager here?
Wow, that's so interesting, actually. Okay, so you just mentioned that with correct guidance, student can have like a good experience with all of this, right? So can you tell us who was your guidance when who guided you through all of this when you went to Australia as an international student?
So I think there were many people that played an interactive part in this, but I would say that my student advisors played a very, very big role, because when you go into a very new place, excuse me, where you've got to be suddenly physically independent, financially independent, academically, emotionally, सबैतिरबाट एकैचोटि independent हुनु पर्दाखेरि at 18 years of age, it does get heavy, and then you think, oh my God, I can't do this. How do I deal with this? So to navigate all of that, our university they had like a dedicated student advisor who would be like the first stop to say if I had a problem, So I think my international student advisor and my career advisor at that point, who later turned out to be very good friends as well, they were very key people, because I was in the mindset of कस्तो गाह्रो या कस्तो तनाव जे गरे नि हुँदैन रहेछ हुन्छ नि बेकार आएको म के गरिरहेको छु how do I navigate life, how do I navigate this ocean of choices that I have, do I even like what I'm studying, what will I do with my future, so many questions. But sitting with them and navigating your inside, because what I felt was all the turmoil was on the outside, but then when we did so many reflection sessions, counseling sessions about what is it that I feel that what do I want from the inside, मेरो भित्र त आफूले आफूलाई चिन्ने मौका चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ दिनुभयो उहाँहरुसँग चाहिँ I feel those two people, Eve and Tina, were my international student advisors and my career advisors. So they had a very key role to play for me to navigate life as a young adult.
Wow. Actually, yeah, a lot of students, they lack this, right? As soon as we finish our plus 2 or A levels, it's just very overwhelming. We're like put up with a lot of choices. Suddenly you have to know what you want to do in your survey. So yeah, you're right. It's actually important to have such people who can counsel you about your career, about your studies. So do you feel like it's lacking here in Nepal?
I feel that as a culture, let's say for a very long time, as up until we turn 18, like I said earlier in the book club, right, we're not usually familiar with our thoughts as well. Like, what do I think? How do I feel? When your questions are answered, it sort of puts you in a difficult position where you've got to become an adult overnight. So helping in decision making doesn't necessarily mean that people help you make better decisions, but you get comfortable with decision making. Doesn't mean that you will always make the right decisions. I mean, looking back, I feel that the degree that I did wasn't probably the best degree for me, but it was a decision that I took and I own up to it. So you would say that sense of accountability for decision making and that freedom to make your decisions. Yes, I definitely feel that one, there is a pressure to suddenly make the right decisions, whereas you can't always make right decisions, but that's okay. Figuring out life in your own pace, taking decisions based on what you want, and then taking responsibility for that decision is a trend. We're so scared to make the wrong decision that we want to take a decision recommended by someone else, because then that's not my fault. You know what I mean? There's a certain trend that I see because we're so afraid to take responsibility for our own decisions, because correct decisions are very overrated.
That's true. Okay. So would you like to share with us some of the advices maybe you've got? So how can a student find the subject that he or she really wants to study? So any such advices or any such things that they can do on their own, like afe reflect garera or anything like that?
So I would say that as young adults, allow yourself to think and ask, what do I want to do? How do I want to live? What kind of life do I want to have lived? It's the why is the most important question, and everything else is sort of the means to an end. Studying something is the means to an end, the end being the kind of life that you want to live. So if nothing was stopping, many times I see young people wanting to find the degree. They say that मेरो 65% चाहिँ मैले के पढ्न पाउँछु अथवा मेरो IELTS मा यति छ मैले के पढ्न पाउँछु. So you're already limiting yourself, right? You're thinking going from this narrow mindset. But think, if nothing was a barrier, right? If say finances, academics, nothing was a barrier, what do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to live? र मलाई के बन्न मन छ भनेर हामी मजाले सोचौं हैन. त्यसपछि चाहिँ when you that comes from your interests, right? And that comes from your values as well. So one of the exercises that you ask that people can do individually is, it seems a bit morbid, but this is an exercise that I did when I participated in this capability coaching program while in Australia for 10 months. And the first thing that we had to do was we had to write our own obituary. Afne Shraddhanjali lekhne ke. So to say that if you passed away today, what would people say about you? What would, for people, what would your family member, your friends, your colleagues, and like wider society who doesn't know you, if you were to go away from this earth today, what would these four people say about you? And what do you want them to say about you? So maybe आज नै भन्नुहुन्छ भने देखिन्छ, maybe नोबडीले खासै नोटिस गरेको छैन होला, हुन्छ नि पढ्थ्यो मात्रै भन्नुहुन्छ कि आजको डेटमा चाहिँ के भन्नुहुन्छ र what do you want to be remembered as? भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ for people that are not very clear about their intrinsic values, that can be a very strong mirror to reflect upon, to say that, oh my God, I actually want to be remembered as this person, as this kind of a person, you know? So these are my core values, right? So core values can turn out to be wanting to leave a legacy. Core values might be just living light and having fun. You know, I want to be remembered as somebody who spread joy, or as somebody who was a very strong leader, or as somebody who made people's lives better. So then you find out what your core values are. So from there, it sounds very big and very deep, but I honestly feel that considering the depth of the ocean of choices that we're in, this can be a great exercise that you find out what are my core values, and they're not going to be static, right? एकचोटि पायो भन्दैमा त्यो भ्याल्युज जहिले त्यही रहन्छ र ओ माय गॉड मलाई त थाहै भएन आफ्नो भ्याल्युज भनेर त्यसरी सोच्ने भन्दा पनि you sort of find out the kind of person that you are, and then you find out what you want to become that will support your vision or your dream. And then you look at, okay, maybe I want to study, I don't know, creative art sounds interesting. So मलाई के बन्न मन छ, मलाई कस्तो लाइफ जिउन मन छ, त्यसपछि मलाई त्यसको लागि के बन्न मन छ भन्ने खालको अप्सन्स हेर्यो हैन. त्यसपछि त्यो अप्सन्स हेरेपछि चाहिँ मलाई बन्न मन लागेको चीज अथवा मलाई पढ्न मन लागेको चीज म कहाँ पढौँ त? त्यो चीज नेपालमा होला, विभिन्न कन्ट्रीजमा होला. And then, okay, maybe you highlight 6 universities across the world that is offering the kind of degree that you want to study. Then you go and look at, okay, यो 6 वटाको चाहिँ fees कसको कति छ, maybe हुन्छ नि कुन ठाउँमा छ, maybe मेरो लोकेसन प्रेफरेन्सेस छन् भनेदेखि, then maybe कसको academic entry requirement कति छ, त्यहाँ मात्रै आउँछ कि तर हामीले त्यो फिल्टर पहिले माथि राख्थ्यो भने त हामी कति लिमिट गर्यौं नि त आफुलाई. So पहिला चाहिँ if everything worked in my favor, what do I want to do? One question, dare to ask yourself that, because your education is going to be a very big investment, not just money, but time and energy. You're going to be investing so much. So do that research. You owe yourself that much to do that much research, and dare to ask yourself, what do I want to do? And finally, when you reach that stage, then you might see like, okay, out of the 6 universities that I selected, मेरो academic background, मेरो financial background, मेरो experiences like say you दुईटा uni चाहिँ best रहेछ, and then you apply. So त्यसरी चाहिँ म navigate गर्नु भनेर recommend गर्छु.
Well, that's a very good advice actually. So since you did the assessment yourself, I want to know what were your core values?
When I did this assessment, or when I did this task of having to write my own obituary, I did not really have a clear idea of what was it that I wanted to do, how did I want to live.
That's okay.
Sorry?
And that's okay as well, right?
And that's absolutely okay. But I felt like I was doing a commerce degree with an accounting major, but I really felt like I didn't want to be an accountant. This wasn't my calling. But then I felt, but I'm not studying bachelor's of social work. How will I be a social worker? But then when I wrote what I want to be remembered as, it was definitely legacy. Like that legacy part definitely came into play, and also enabling people. So if एउटा field ma khatra bhanda pani, I wanted to have that impact on people's lives, that people's lives were better because of my involvement in it. So not from a very donor or a very elitist mentality of donations and but making some difference that actually enables their lives to be better. So that was what gave me a clear idea of, okay, this is the kind of life that I want to live. That's why, people, when I guess people look at my career history of studying commerce with an accounting major, then working in a bank, the largest financial institute in Australia, then leaving all of that to come to Miss Nepal, and then becoming Miss Nepal, and then starting a job at a university, then starting like a halwai business. It all seems very like, what is this career path? This is like what is leading? What's the jipani I feel like it's very much aligned to the kind of life that I want to have lived. So that makes sense for me.
Okay. So can you tell us about your teaching learning experience from your school to ACE to ACU, right? Australian Catholic University. So can you tell us the differences and one thing you liked about each of them and one thing you wish you would change about each of them?
So Mary Poppins, I honestly don't have that many memories, but I did go in for a summer camp, and I do remember, but my parents keep the working files. So when I look at that, there was a lot of arts and craft involved. So we would have these booklets that there was a lot of arts and crafts involved, which I guess a lot of prep schools do. So that was that. And sports was a very big part as well. So we would have like our sports days in Gyanodaya at that time. So that was probably the only time where I played sports. So it was very interactive. Then moving on to Triyog, I was a very academically well-performing child. And I will say that my other friends in Cinemat who did not align with the kind of teaching that was done in the school at the time where I studied. Maybe they did not have a great, pleasant experience. Because त्यो स्टाइलको पढाइ चाहिँ म्याच हुने खालको मान्छे भएर म लकी भए जस्तो लाग्छ that I performed academically well किनभनेदेखि राम्रै मार्क्सहरू आउँथ्यो अनि म चाहिँ फेरि एकदमै अडिटरी लर्नर पनि हुँ सो म चाहिँ क्लासमा सुने भनेदेखि मलाई आयो मलाई बसेर पढ्नै आउँदैन हुन्छ नि एसएलसी बेलामा I would sleep at like 10 o'clock and my mom would be like 12 बजेसम्म त पढ भनेर तर मेरो मैले क्लासमा ध्यान दिएको छु भने मलाई आउँछ र मलाई केही चिज आएन भने चाहिँ मलाई कोही साथीले सिकाइदिनु पर्ने बोलेर हुन्छ नि आफै पढेर भन्दा so that was very difficult at university because university is very much self study whereas मैले चाहिँ एकदम auditory learning क्लासमा पढाएको चाहिँ बुझ्ने खालको थिएँ स्कुलमा what I would looking back and it's gotten so much better. I look at Triyog today and it is one of the schools that is very much engaged in the community doing things such as I saw something about there was like digital Sathi winner. So they were pairing up young kids with grandparents generations or let's say tech khasai very comfortable now and so they were doing activities like this. So that is something that I really, really admire. But looking back, not so much with the school, but perhaps with the whole subject heavy social studies when you've got geography, history, and so much in there. Science, when you've got physics, chemistry, biology. So हामीले रियलाइज गरेको भन्दा धेरै चिज चाहिँ हामीले पढ्यौँ हैन अलिकति जाँदै गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ that perhaps was a bit heavy and what would I perhaps change as well is that and it goes into a longer conversation because teacher हुन कति गाह्रो छ भनेर पनि आफूले पछि बुझिदै चाहिँ गयो हैन र एकदमै राम्रो टिचर्स पाउन पनि कति गाह्रो छ तर teachers who would teach with experience. I know कि university level मा चाहिँ people have that where people say talking about banking have worked in a bank so that comes more naturally to them. So perhaps having instructors who are more interactive in a few subjects is what I would have liked better in the teaching learning experience. It was never like rote learning was never really emphasized on, so I was very glad. And then moving on to ACE, I think it was a splendid teaching learning experience because there I feel like my transition into university was smoother because people were treated as adults at ACE, as 17, 18-year-olds, you were treated as an adult in the sense, okay, you take your decision and you take responsibility for it. So it was like you were very much held accountable for your own decisions. So there were different types of people studying at ACE, and I performed very well as well, but you were let be. The result is on you. Sense of accountability that was amazing. So teaching learning Mapani, it was very practical, it was very engaging, very interactive. Question asking was always encouraged and it was a very friendly, open environment where you could be yourself, you could figure out yourself, and then you really saw the results of your own doing. So people were really allowed to be themselves. So that was the teaching learning experience at ACE2. Looking back, what perhaps could have been better is what I hear from people who did bachelors here. Industry perhaps it would be even better, a little bit more industry experience maybe would have been better. And then moving on to the university, it was a very different teaching learning model as opposed to what we're used to in Nepal, because there is a lot of self-study involved. So Euta subject ko, we had a 3-year bachelor's degree and 1 year had 2 semesters. Each semester was just 12 weeks of study, 12 hafta study period. And then you would study 4 subjects in 1 semester. And harik subject ko just Euta lecture, Euta tutorial matre huntyo ke hafta bharima, that's it. So त्यो बाहेकको जति पनि assignments, readings, त्यो self-study, self-motivated. So although I performed well in my academics, I think you can do well. I mean, in my assignments, you could do well in your assignments. But looking back, if I would have really made use of that whole self-study culture, then I would have learned a lot more जस्तो हुन्छ नि, because 2 घण्टा ट्युटोरियलमा त यति धेरै कुरा कभर गर्छ, देन यति असाइनमेन्ट गरेर आइपुग्छ नेक्स्ट विक भने नि यति मात्र असाइनमेन्ट गरेर गइदिने. Whereas people who had been studying in that self-study culture, who had done their year 12 at ACU, they would have these like big notebooks and they would have like sticky notes hanging all around. उहाँहरूलाई चाहिँ आफै पढ्ने बानी रहेछ, हामीलाई चाहिँ पढाएको जति मात्र पढ्ने बानी हुन्छ. So that was a very different teaching learning experience, and that is what I say to all the people wanting to pursue a broader education. And I can only speak for Australia because that's where I've studied, is that self-study is going to be a very big part of your study. So if you want to succeed, and I don't just mean get well in your assignments, but really succeed in knowing the content of what is being taught, then get comfortable with self-study.
Okay. Yeah. So So I wanted to ask you this: that how tapaiको typical university day कस्तो हुन्थ्यो from morning to night in ACU? What would happen? Like, what was your routine?
So in Australia, I think and that's something that I really look back upon, is that it seems as if it's like work, making sure that you have the fees enough for next semester, and then you go to class, and then it's like relaxation. So my priority is the class is going because class is so exam agadi matra padne kinan tyo bahek cha jati milcha काम गरौँ, पैसा सेभ गरौँ ट्युसन को लागि भन्ने चाहिँ हुन्थ्यो. So looking back, it would depend on what semester and what classes that I had. Perhaps one of the toughest semesters I had would be, I had a morning shift from 6 to 10 at McDonald's. So I would leave my home at 5 a.m. in the morning. 4 बजे उठेर म 5 बजे जान्थे. अनि त्यसपछि 6 to 10 काम गरेपछि म 11 मा uni जान्थे, because I had a class from 12 to 2. अनि 12 to 2 class गरेपछि फेरि म बेलुकाको shift गर्न जान्थे from I think it was 4 to 8. And then I came back home. So it would be a balance of maintaining classes and home. Sometimes I would go to uni and then do work in between, and then go back to uni again and then come back home. So it was always like work was always there. I mean, the classes it felt really good to be in that zone, that this is what I'm here to do, and then you really appreciate the books that are so expensive. Finally, porn by you kitab bhanera. So that would be my daily routine, would be a good balance of work and university.
Okay, so a lot of students that are going from here, they struggle with this, right? They have to juggle with work and their education. So how do students not let work affect their studies? Like, how did you manage to do it, Tekibela?
I think having a clear idea of the timeline, so when you're off of work, like leave the mind act over there. So sometimes we drag that on, and then that's still at the back of our minds when we are studying as well. So you can't maybe also I'll leave it over there. And then subtle things such as there's this thing called progressive muscle relaxation, when you can't and then you have like little pockets of sleep. I once had a semester where, because of my work shift and my studies, I had to sleep in like 4-hour installments. So such things such as, meditating and muscle relaxation, that would be very helpful. But then keeping priority that you're here to study, and study not just meaning academic achievement, but really knowing that content. You've spent so much time and energy to do this. So don't forget that that is your main priority, not just to perform well, but enjoy yourself at uni as well. And uni ne kati jachham ra yati dherai free facilities haru pani huncha, yati dherai universities ma you have access to so many things. As a current student, you have access to the library, to so many facilities, to people. You can make so many friends over there. So allow yourself to really enjoy that uni experience. Uni ma huँदाखेरि go to that library, go to that cultural fiesta or whatever it is. Make most of it. All that heavy fees that you pay is not just to go to class like 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Make use of anything. My would be anything that's free, just go to it at university. Make most of your investment over there.
Okay. So when you were there, did you apply for scholarship programs, or since you're working very close to your university, would you like to tell our viewers how the scholarship programs work and all of that?
I did not apply, and that is something that I regret. And I'll tell you why, because it sounds so silly right now, because it's in Kathmandu, capital ma janmeko huर्केको मान्छे म English medium school ma pani gएको, but then I heard कि Australia ma scholarship पाउँदैन रे भन्नेमा र त्यो basis matter. I was like, so how easily we are, people that give this advice, perhaps they are giving advice that was relevant to their time, or they might not know as well. But we have to be accountable for our own decisions, right? So I don't blame anyone for not getting a scholarship. I blame myself for not being smart enough to find out what's there. Mm-hmm. And I did not check it. So I would really say that explore. We are in the technology era, which is a curse and a boon, because there is so much information, and how do you navigate it? But then there are people like us to help you navigate through that, right? So I did not get a scholarship as such. We did have an automatic scholarship that was for all business students, which was like a $5,000 scholarship every year, which I got as well. But what happened was, because I performed well, I got a job at the university. We would have these peer assisted study sessions, peer assisted study session. So if you scored well in a subject, you would get the opportunity to tutor students studying the same subjects next semester, and the university would pay for it. So I did tutor for about 3 semesters for 3 units.
Okay, wow. So scholarships now. Okay, so I wanted to ask you, how did you come across Australian Catholic University? Was it through an institute, like, or how did you personally hear from someone, or?
I actually walked into an education fair, the kind of education fair that I host now. So my boss right now was actually the first person that I met from the university. And I feel like it's such a full circle in so many senses, because I just walked in and I was just trying to find out, I just walked into a seminar happening in Dargamar. So I walked in and I had a look, and I loved the way it was interacted. And when I wrote to the university, the response was really good. And I felt that it was for the same reasons that I've taken up this job right now, was the reasons why I joined the university, that it was a good balance between affordability, but then getting like a reputed, well-ranked education for that fees, versus, and also like great support services. I think we underestimate how important support services are. And like I said, one of the biggest success factors for me personally at university life was having that support services, was having that student advisor, that career advisor, that counselor over there. And that made the world of a difference.
So because of this pandemic and lockdown, our lives have turned upside down, right? For students, it's even more harder, who are living away from their family. They have to think about finance, they have to think about their studies and everything. So would you like to say anything to them? Like, so how would you manage if you were in that place where you're away from family?
Being away from family right now, I realize it can be a lot tough. So one thing I would definitely say to people living abroad, to students living abroad, is something that I've also experienced, is that even though we're young, when we stay away from our family, we feel like we have to protect them, that we can't really share our pain with them. Dukha dinu hunna bhanne jasto लाग्छ. Then what happens is we don't share our hardships, right? But then our subconscious mind wants that love and attention and affection. But then our parents, say for example, sitting here, they won't know that you're suffering. It's not going to be like total Bollywood that, parents sense something is wrong. You're completely telling them soft ticks up, but then the real picture is not soft ticks China. And then that sort of draws a drift where it's not necessary. It's something that I've seen happen a lot. So I would say that, your parents are strong to be able to handle if you're not doing well. They're your immediate close circle. So whatever you are feeling, I just feel like I need to just talk to you for a while. You sort of don't relay your reality. And when you don't relay your reality, you don't get that support that subconsciously or unconsciously you are craving. And that sort of draws the drift, right? And you try to fulfill that lack of support that you feel by making maybe not the best friends, or maybe diving into alcohol or things like that. That may happen. What I would say is be open and maintain that communication with people that you're close with. Good intentions dukha nadine bhanera, especially ahileko belama garo bhaye pani nabhanna khojumla, tara garo bhairachha bhane भन्नुस्. ठिकै छ, if your friends and family are not in a position to be able to support you, all universities, all education institutes, if not the state, wherever you're in, will have support services. So there would be free call helplines. I remember earthquake gako belama when I was in Australia, I was so frustrated. I didn't know what to do. I did not know what I feel. I just felt really, really bad. And at that point, I couldn't keep calling my family because, they were trying to figure things out for themselves. So I called so many helplines, free helplines, to say, I'm just not feeling well, because you just need to talk to someone. Yeah. So I would say that all the support services that are there. अहिले त नेपालमै पनि कति धेरै यस्ता बाहिरबाट पनि कल गर्न मिल्ने नम्बरहरू छन्. So ask for help. Ask yourself how you are feeling. It is absolutely okay to not be feeling well right now. Acknowledge it and deal with it. हुन्छ नि के हुन सबै ठिकै छ भनेर त्यो एउटा delusionमा हिँड्नु भन्दा accept how you are feeling. Seek that support from people that you love, and with that open communication, your bond will even go tighter, and you will perform academically or physically. You will perform better, both of you, parents and people living abroad, students living abroad.
That's such a helpful thing. Whatever you said, I agree to that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit like fun experiences from school. So we all do something stupid at that age, right? To class 10 or 80. So would you like to share any experience? Something. I
was pretty much like a goody two shoes. I was very much मेरो दिमागमा आफैले के गर्नु हुन्छ हुँदैन भनेर चाहिँ एकदमै नै strongly थियो आफ्नो दिमागमा. I don't know why. So I don't really have very much बदमासी experiences because मलाई चाहिँ एकदम नराम्रै काम हो जस्तो लाग्थ्यो. So I hadn't stepped into a club when I was like 18. I would go to Australia and people would say like, oh, Newtown is like the Tamil of Australia. And then I'd be like, Tamil what is the Tamil of Australia? I think the silliest thing that I would have done during that time was date. And I mean, so you think about it as a very serious relationship. So that was that. I think that was perhaps the silliest thing that I did at that point was date serious.
Okay. So, one of the most important things that you learned in life that was not taught by a teacher? Actually, most of the important things we learn in life are outside of school, right? So, anyways, one of those things.
I think the most important lesson that I would say right now is that you've got to own your decisions. And making the correct decisions, you've got to take accountability of the decisions that you take. So that might come from impulse, that might come from planning. तर आँट्नु चाहिँ पर्दो रहेछ आफूले चाहेको डिसिजन लिनलाई र ओन अप गर्नु पर्दो रहेछ र त्यो ओन अप गर्न चाहिँ it can come from a place of humility. It doesn't have to come from a place of arrogance and a place of rebellion, being quietly confident and developing your inner values to make the decisions in life. That I think is very, very important. आफैले एकदमै ढुक्क परेको ढक्क परेको आफ्नो डिसिजन्सहरु चाहिँ लिनु पर्दो रहेछ लाइफमा. धेरै डराएर बस्नु हुँदैन.
So, since you said that you have your own business, Makuse, right? So, how much did this help you, like taking accountability of your own decision? This was maybe important, right? For because this is something that
Absolutely.
no one has done. I never thought like Pushtakari, Good Packer would come up like this. So, what was the story behind it? What was the thought processes that you had when you started a business? And yeah, so could you tell us that?
I think I got more comfortable with decision making with things such as Makuse because I was also, very scared of making decisions, and that fear came from the fear of failure. जस्तो लाग्छ हुन्छ नि मैले सुरुमा पनि भने that making the right decisions are very romanticized. Like good people make right decisions भन्ने खालको एउटा black and white thought भएपछि चाहिँ you are so scared to make the wrong decision, something that does not result in immediate success, that you sort of try to play safe. You try to play safe because it can't go wrong that way. Or you take decisions that are influenced by others because then that's not your decision, right? You don't have to take responsibility when you. But then decisions such as Makuse, Gornu, it perhaps was leading from that life learning that we talked about making decisions and taking accountability for your decision. Because I know that I have decided to do this business and having complete faith that we will make it work, and then being okay if it doesn't go the way that we imagine it to be as well, because this is my learning, this is our learning, Banera. So the whole process was perhaps a reflection of all the self learning and the self finding, the self excavation that has happened 2 years in the past about what is it that I want to do, what kind of life do I want to live. After personal reflection, I felt like working with something made in Nepal, making good use of the whole Nepali identity line that happened with Miss Nepal and with Miss Nepal World. So that Nepali identity, wanting to do something in Nepal, wanting to work within a community and not just make the rich richer, not that there is anything wrong with it, but that would be debatable. So working closely with dairy farmers and making that happen, having that element of authenticity, but then having that risk element as well of something innovative and new. And overall, just everyday problem solving, loving to problem solve. All those elements which are important to me sort of culminated very well in this business. And this was not something, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would not have been able to say even a single thing that's in my life right now. So to flow allow have that vision, that direction of the kind of life that you want to have lived, but then let it flow as well. So that balance between having the end picture in mind versus going with the flow, which we sometimes think are very aar-parko कुरा. You can either be very goal oriented or you can be a go with the flow person. But when you have that goal in mind and then go in the flow in that direction, that can be a perfect way to navigate life.
Okay. So I have two main questions and a few questions that we asked our followers. I'll try to cut it short as possible. So Makuseko Varete, I wanted to ask that, can you tell us that one problem that you faced, during starting this business and it was very hard? So would you like to share any such experience?
So of the many things that was difficult, I think getting and managing people, I would say was quite a challenge, because we often hear that lack of job opportunities in Nepal, but when you're in the employer's shoes, finding the right people or finding people to do the job well was a very difficult challenge, because and looking back at why there is that culture of excellence 9 to 5 जाने र यति तलब पाक्नु पर्छ मेरो यति सर्टिफिकेटले भन्ने खालको छ, as opposed to a very performance driven culture, which is what we try to put over here, is that how much value do you add to the whole process, and how performance driven are you? So that was a difficulty, which I think we're getting there. The team that we've been working with for the past year, we are very performance oriented, so that I would say was a challenge.
Okay, so lastly, I wanted to put this question. I saw it in your story that in lockdown you tried reading a lot of books, right? So can you suggest 3 of your favorite books?
So 3 of my favorite books that I would suggest for people to read would be, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So that is by Stephen Covey. Yes, that's by Stephen Covey. So Seven Habits of Highly Effective People is one. Then I would say Secret. The Secret one is, and many might find it a bit gimmicky, to begin with, but the core principles that are mentioned there they're amazing. It's a very short book. So that about self-growth, the Secret is more about the law of attraction. Then the Seven Habits is more about the tools that can help you reach that goal. And or fiction, I'd say, what would I recommend? I think मैले धेरै अगाडि पढेको किताब हो, but it really remains as one of my timeless favorites, is Love and Death in Kathmandu. It's written by an Australian couple, and it sort of figures out Nepal within the time of the Royal Massacre. So it sort of tries to find the answer of the Royal Massacre. But for people like me who grew up during this time of 2008, 9, the Maoist insurgency time, so 2001, I was in year 1. So त्यो whole time चाहिँ जब भइरहेको थियो हामीले त त्यसलाई पढ्न पनि पाएन आफ्नो किताबमा, because history was being made, I guess, So for people in our generation to understand what kind of how was Nepal like at that time, and how does that come into play of how we are right now, and it's a book that I would definitely recommend, Love and Death in Kathmandu.
Okay, thank you so much for your book suggestions. So yeah, as I said we asked our followers on Instagram if they had any questions for you. So Sakina Maharjan, she wanted to know your experience. ACE College ko barema kehi bhanidinus na as an alumni. That's what she wants to do.
So I think we've talked about this already interview Mapani, that ACE was a great, pleasant experience, lovely faculty members, a lot of activities allowing people, very different kinds of people, to be themselves. So I think that was the best part about ACE, is that, ACE was not good for just one type of people. It was a great place for all people, because they could just figure themselves out and excel in whatever they wanted, be it academics, extracurriculars, sports, event management, and whatnot.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions about ACE College, actually, your experience there. And so I hope, so we talked about this as well. So I'll skip to another question. ACE ko bare bhanda. So Puntu81, she asks, how did you cope with cultural shock in abroad studies?
Cultural shock, yeah, there was a lot of cultural shock. I think the biggest one was that people really didn't share food, and that is one of the few things that my relatives say, that you can't just grab fries from another person's plate. You've got to ask, and most people just get their own food. So that sort of individualistic culture. Well, I don't think people don't share food, but it was not common practice to, just grab a fry off of someone else's plate. So that sense of individuality, boundaries maintain people, what people are comfortable with and not. That is perhaps a cultural shock. But then coming back as well, sometimes you think, you never get that reverse culture shock. Ventures of a bite around and they're suddenly like, oh, then we say, but that's not true. You do get reverse culture shock when you live away from a place and then you come back. It feels difficult to adjust into that as well. So culture shock and then reverse culture shock indeed are very, very real.
Thank you so much. This video was so informative. The more I talked to you, it was getting so informative and so interesting. But yeah, I can understand you have a very busy schedule. So with this, we come to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Upasana, for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So at last, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We will be posting similar contents in the future as well. Thank you.